Now on UK Health Radio, treat yourself to an upgrade. Pack away your low self-esteem. Leave behind that empty feeling. Stow your fears and doubts in the overhead locker. And go from stress to authentic success with Danielle Sachs.
Hello to you, and yes, we are in another week, another show, and I just want to welcome you onto this amazing platform, UK Health Radio. Whether you are listening to the radio show or the podcast, it doesn't matter to me, but I just want to thank you and congratulate you to taking your health in your hands, taking responsibility for your health, your wealth, your well-being, and of course, for your authentic success. And I trust that week after week, I can continue to inspire you, the listener out there, the loyal person who listens every single week, to get the best strategies, tips, stories to move from stress to authentic success. And today I'm not going to disappoint you, because I am going to talk to an American-born amazing grandmother. Yes, she's already a grandmother just like me. I'm going to talk to Barbara Berger, and Barbara is an author, a best-selling author of the book, The Road to Power, Fast Food for the Soul, which was published in more than, I think, about 30 languages. So she has several books, but I wanted to talk to her about her latest book, because that to me is a book that we all need to read. The title is Healthy Models for Relationships, the basic principles behind good relationships with your partner, family, parents, children, friends, colleagues, and all the other people in your life. Now, why did I choose to have this conversation with Barbara Berger? Because I do believe that we need more, let's say, strategies and tips on how to have these healthy relationships. Because when I look into my practice, so many of my clients are struggling in their relationship with themselves, but certainly also in their relationships with their partner, their kids, and often with their boss or colleagues or clients. So I think it's a really important subject to go and see what these basic principles are, and how you and I, how we can model that healthy relationship that she talks about. So I can't wait to talk to her about her. But let's also remind you, and I want to remind myself as well, that first of all, a relationship to me is a connection. When you and I communicate, it is all about connection. So that to me is one of the basic principles. And I am curious to hear about the connection that she sees in there, and about how the respect and the boundaries and everything that we so need in our relationships, how she is going to talk about it. And I know she has a huge experience in that field. So yeah, I think she can really inspire us. And I encourage you to listen to the end, when I'm going to make a little summary after our conversation and talk about what insights I had from our conversation together. So I trust that this conversation will inspire you and even myself to, as I say, to put more energy and more effort in our relationships. And I will see you just now after this little break.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Yes, here I am again, and I am talking to this beautiful lady out in Copenhagen. Welcome, Barbara Berger.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be here.
Well, it's a great honor for me too, because I believe that you are a best-selling author and you've written so many books. And today I am actually talking to you, Barbara, about your latest book, I believe. Just give us a little bit of background of first, before we talk about the book, on who you are in a way that you are that therapist. And I mean, for ages, I believe. So tell
Yes.
me a little bit what your journey up until now has been.
Well, my journey has always been seeking the truth and how can we ease human suffering. That's my mission. How do we ease human suffering? So I've always been working with alternative therapies, medicine, and now the power of the mind. I have written many books about the power of the mind, how the focus of our attention determines our experience. And so many people have been coming to me over the years who have problems in their families or in their relationships. And so more and more it has come to me that some of the solutions and the practical advice that I give to people and how I help guide people through their relationship problems, that I ought to write that down too. So that's actually how the last book came about, is sort of the summary of that information that I have been sharing with people over the years. And the reason why it's called Healthy Models for Relationship, this is a sort of something that I figured out on my way through this journey, helping people, that people who come to me all the time, whether we talk about the power of the mind and what they're focusing their attention on, their relationship problems, they have discomfort or they feel something's not working, but they haven't really been able to formulate exactly what the problem is. And so I discovered along the way that if I could outline a healthy model, in other words, what does a healthy couple relationship look like? Or what does a healthy family relationship look like? Or what does a healthy relationship between a parent and a child look like? If I could outline and define that, and then I could share it with a client who was having problems, it became suddenly much easier for them to identify what was off in their own relationship situation. In other words, people know that something feels wrong, that they feel discomfort, but they don't know exactly what is it. And then if you can say, okay, it's actually a question about a lack of healthy boundaries. Then it's like, okay, if we can identify where it's off, it makes it much easier to have a targeted solution. How can I work on this? So this whole concept of healthy models for relationship is something that has arisen naturally in terms of my own background. You could say my own relationships, but also all the relationship problems I've been discussing over many, many years with people. And actually, in some of my other books, there are also bits and pieces of what is clearly outlined in this new book. Okay.
And so what is a healthy relationship for you? What does that actually mean?
Well, if we go back to, it's all based on what I say, our basic democratic principles or our basic democratic rights, which are that every human being has a right to be here because they are here. Every human being is a creation of this infinite universe and is here. And so a democracy is based on the right that each person has the right to be who they are. And the challenge of democracy is always, how do we so interact wisely with each other, at the same time respecting the fact that each individual has a right to be who they are. In other words, and people are different. I mean, that's the problem. If we were all identical, it wouldn't be a problem. But so you could say, but we have these democratic principles in our societies. You could say we fortunately live in democratic societies. And the principle of a democracy is one person, one vote. Every person who's a citizen has a voice. It doesn't matter if you're young, if you're old, if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're healthy, if you're sick, if you're black, if you're white, if you're a man, if you're a woman, every citizen has equal right to their say. And then in a democracy, we elect our representatives, and then they go into the parliament and they discuss the different points of views, and they try to find what I call the workable compromise, and that becomes legislation. So that's in the social context. So my book, I say in the very beginning of this book, I asked the question, how well are we doing in terms of these democratic principles in our own families? Mm. And so when people come to me for coaching or therapy about their family situations, that's the way I work. We look at, okay, so where is there a lack of respect? Where is there a lack of healthy boundaries? Is there the dominant, the submissive, the aggressive, the passive, all of these different, as you know, you're also a therapist, these different things that we see. How do we deal with that?
And Barbara, I just want to say that when you talk about boundaries, to me, in my practice, it is one of the most challenging things that we all have is setting boundaries. Mm-hmm. It is one, to say no to others is one of and to respect ourselves so much that we say yes to ourselves is one of the biggest challenges in that every client here in my practice has. I mean, I don't want to generalize it, but most people have a challenge. Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
I have a whole chapter where I list what I call the 10 most common boundary violations. And the way I explain it to people is, I always say to people, okay, if we imagine that in a relationship, it's like a tennis court. You got two people playing and you have this net in the middle. Mm. And then when you play tennis and a good craft of tennis, you don't jump over on the other person's side of the net and play. You stay on your side. True. So you could say that the most common boundary violation is when you give someone unsolicited, unasked for advice. In other words, when you tell another person what they should eat, how they should fix their hair, how they should raise their children, what they should be wearing to the next party, and the person didn't ask for your advice, you are basically hopping over the net onto the other person's side.
I agree.
So that's unsolicited, unasked for advice, which is the most common thing that happens. And that is the number one, so you could say, principle of boundary violations. It's a different story. It gets a bit more complicated. There are exceptions to this rule. You could say that if the person asks for your advice,
that's different.
Of course, that's something else. If I say to you, Danielle, I'm going to a party tonight, should I wear the red dress or should I wear the blue dress? Then you can say to me, oh, Barbara, the red dress is horrible. Wear the blue dress. I asked for your opinion. But if I don't ask you, then the wise way.
Can I ask you, doesn't it start with the judgment?
Absolutely.
It starts for me always with how we have been conditioned to judge, whether it's ourselves or others, but how we have been conditioned to judge. And of course, because we judge, that's where you cross that boundary.
Well, again, if we go back to, I understand that you haven't read the book yet, but if we go back to the nature of reality, and the way consciousness and the mind works, it's really important. What you're talking about is arbitrary standards and judgments, to understand that every single human being from the day we're born, we are programmed with the belief systems of our family, our society, our country, our religion, and so on. So we have all of these, we are conditioned and we're programmed, and we're all unaware of this. It happens automatically. And it's first when we start to do this inner work journey that we start to notice that we have all these conditioned responses. We have all these uninvestigated belief systems. And that, of course, is one of the things that happens when we start working with ourselves and also with our relationships. We become aware of, oh my God, And so you are absolutely right. Boundary violations are always a sign that there are usually many uninvestigated beliefs. And another one of my books is called Are You Happy Now? That's really goes into investigating our stories and our belief systems, because that's also a really big, a very, very troubling aspect of this for everyone. But the good news is that when we start to wake up to these mechanisms, that's the first step on the road to freedom and healing, because as long as we're unaware of what we're doing, we can't do it. It's just a conditioned response. But if we can start to see, oh my God, I'm doing this, or oh my God, the other person is doing that, then we can start to say, okay, well, what would be a more healthy response? What would be a more appropriate, respectful response? And that's when the fun begins, actually, when you start to realize that there are other options. So most of the people that I work with who actually get into this, they get so happy and liberated because first of all, they can see what's going on. It's not all their fault. And they get some tool. I mean, I work a lot with assertiveness training as there are different techniques and constructive communications of how we can deal with boundary violations and take good care of ourselves and be respectful at the same time.
Now, when you just said that one of your specialties and one of your passions in life is how can we ease human suffering? What is to you the biggest suffering that the human has?
Oh, the biggest ignorance.
Like I'm serious, Barbara, because ignorance. I think it's a huge thing that the suffering is we make ourselves suffer.
Well, again, if we go back to the nature of reality, I always start my discussions with people we have to look at the way life is, not the way we think it should be. So I have what I call in the middle of this book, the basic observations about the nature of reality. It's really important to understand that there is what I call reality. And by that, I mean the things that are happening in your life, the people that show up, the events, the circumstances. That's what I mean by the stuff out there. That's reality. But then you and me and every other human being, we have our thinking about what's going on.
Our own reality.
Yeah. So in other words, there's the thing that happens, there's an event or you meet somebody, but then you have your interpretation of what this is going to mean for you. And it's not so much what that happens that's the problem. It's your interpretation.
Yes,
so in other words, it's our interpretation that determines our experience always.
Yes.
And this is a great, great discovery because it's the key to freedom. So understanding that, I mean, again, I always say to people, don't believe what I say, test it for yourself because it doesn't work for you unless you can see it yourself. So I always say to people, well, if you have an event, for example, and you have 10 people present at the same event, the same thing going on, in principle, you can have 10 completely different experiences. And that's also why in relationship problems, family problems, and all this, everybody, I always say, when you sit at a table, like it's the Christmas or it's the Thanksgiving or it's when you have all these people, you have everybody's in their own subjective bubble and having their own experience. And that's 100% based on their belief systems and their programming.
Yes, I agree.
And so, I mean, if we go back to how do we best deal with this? That's also, we come to the famous, for example, serenity prayer. God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom, which is what we're talking about, the wisdom to know the difference. So I call my approach getting real. In other words, becoming more realistic about what is it that we can actually do something about and what is it that we can't do anything about. And other people, what's going on in their subjective bubble, we cannot control 100%. So that's really important to notice.
But I have a question because I like your subtitle, Basic Principles, behind good relationships with, whether it's partners, family, children, colleagues, whatever it is. Now, how do you cope with you wanting to have a mother, a healthy relationship, but the other one isn't? How do you cope with that if the other one isn't as aware as you are?
Well, there's two things going on. The one is you're responsible for your 50% of the interaction. And when the dynamic is dysfunctional or unhealthy or disrespectful, I always say, like, for example, I do couple therapies. It's great when both people come, but I always say if only one of the people come to me, that's still good enough, because if you are responsible for your thoughts, your behavior, what you say, and by learning to be more assertive, by learning to speak more constructively, it's really interesting that you force actually the other person. Because if you change, you change your
the energy, the dynamic
exactly.
changes.
The energy dynamic changes. So it's, I would say, let's not underestimate the power of what we do ourselves. And now when I say that, there are also certain relationships which cannot be saved. That's also getting real. If a person is abusive or disrespectful, or I mean, again, in the boundary violations, people who are always telling you what to do or know better than you, how you feel, think, I mean, that is not a healthy relationship. And so I always, when people come and they have that kind of problem, I mean, I suggest, ways that they can try to tackle it. And sometimes it works and things do get better. Hurrah. And sometimes it doesn't work. So that's again.
Or it gets worse because one has grown and the other is not moving. And then, that's also a moment for choice and decisions.
It often triggers the other person. That's true. So we have to be realistic about what we can actually do.
What we can do. I see what you're saying. And how is that with children? How do you see a healthy relationship with children? What would that be? What would that look like for you?
I have a whole chapter in the book called Sane Parenting, where I try to...
Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah. Well, again, if we go back to, I have this concept also of every person is a unique individual. Every person has an inner compass. By the inner compass, I mean their internal guidance system. And that's true for children too. And so wise parenting, when the children are small, of course, it's our job to take care of them, feed them, clothe them, tell them, to brush their teeth and all that stuff. And I also suggest what I call healthy ground rules in a family. And all of these sort of basic democratic principles in the family, how do we apply them when we're the grown-ups and we have children? But then usually the problems arise for most of the people who come to me is when the kids get to be teenagers.
Yes, I agree.
And so I always say to people, well, by the time your kids are 15, 16, I mean, we're talking about basically game over, but they still live at home. And then we come to this about respecting a child's right to be who they are. And how do we balance that with respecting the ground rules in the family? In other words, who gets to go out with the garbage and who has to clean up and who does what? So I have a lot of techniques that I offer to try to smooth this transition. But you could say the number one headline for the parents is the wonderful art of letting go and trusting. And I always say the best thing you can say to your teenagers is, I trust your intelligence.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I trust your intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. Kids love that. They can figure it out. But also because it's really important. The other thing that's such a big trap for the parents and for the kids, I got young people coming here too, is to think that you should know the answer to everything when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And I always say that the journey of evolution for all of us is that we have to try stuff out. Everything we say and think and do has consequences. That's a universal principle. If I go to the right, it'll have that consequence, and I can try that, and I can see, okay, I go to the right. I don't really like that. Okay, I'm going to try going to the left. So being a human being, I mean, we can go to school to learn to read and write and mathematics and chemistry, but you can't go to school to learn what makes you a happy person. You got to figure that one out yourself.
True.
And the only way we can figure that out is by trying stuff out. And so this whole culture that the young people grow up in now, where they got to know the answer to everything.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
And it needs to be a quick answer and a quick fix and a quick result, because otherwise they're lost.
It's just, I really feel sorry for the kids. I mean, kill me now. It's awful. So again, trial and error. I mean, again, the so-called fear of making mistakes. I mean, I don't even question the word mistakes. Can you make a mistake? It's just trying stuff out and finding out what's in harmony with you and your personality and your heart's desire and what's not. It's not a question about right or wrong.
True. Can I ask you if, because you are talking about many different relationships, is there a ground rule for any relationship? Is there a common, respect? And even with the relationship with yourself, it's self-respect.
Respect is my number one.
Can I tell you something? And I want to share that with you out there, listener, who is interested in this. You know that as parents, my husband is a little bit of a philosopher kind of person, you know. He's an economic, but he's a philosopher. And when we had our children, Barbara, he always said to me, Danielle, I only want 2 rules in the house. We are going to live with our kids. We had 3 children with 2 rules in the house: respect for yourself and respect for the other. And that's the only 2 rules we're going to handle the whole life through. And we still talk about it because it applies on everything. If you didn't clean your room, you didn't have respect for yourself, and you didn't have respect for your mother who wants to clean your room, you know? So it's such a beautiful ground rule, isn't it? Respect.
You must give him all my love. I'll take him if you don't want him.
He's a very special man, I have to say. We married 39 years this year. So, you know, I know what I have in my treasure here. But, just to ask you, is that equally for you? Is that what is so important to you?
Respect is my number. I mean, if you read my book there, that's the number one.
So, and isn't that the one that that so many people miss out on?
I mean, I always say in couple relationships that the number one is, do we treat each other with respect, especially when we disagree?
Okay, that's a good adding sentence.
Especially when we disagree. And then I say in my explanation, your husband might like this, that it's really, really important to understand that love and agreement are 2 different things. You know, childish beliefs, if you love me, you'll do what I want. But when we're grown up and mature, we understand that it's possible to say, darling, I love you, and I disagree with you.
True.
So love and agreement.
I like that. That's a beautiful one.
Yeah.
I really like that. So, can I talk to you about from stress to authentic success? So people come to you, you know, stuck in stress, in relationships, in whatever. What to you is a first advice, a first strategy, a first step that you would give to them to shift out of that stress, out of that crisis, out of that?
Most people who come to me, I have quite a few who are on sick leave because of stress.
Yes.
So I hear this all the time. And first of all, it's really important to understand that stress is an inner state. And there are outer circumstances that we can look at. It's true, but you can say that it's a completely subjective experience.
Yes.
What stresses one person can be exciting for another person.
True. Can be excitement. Yeah.
And so looking at the person's basic belief systems, are they perfectionists? Are they over responsible? Are they people pleasers? All these different subjective states, they are all in that cauldron where we end up collapsing or going down with stress. So because it's our belief systems, and we sign up for too much. It's all kinds of stuff. So you have to clean it all up, but you have to start with looking at the person's belief systems. That's anyway the way I work.
I agree. And if I go to the other hand and we talk about authentic success, what would that be for you?
Authentic success?
Authentic success. What would that be for you?
Love, compassion, respect. wherever you go, whatever you do, to be a force for good, to have good energy, to be.
But do you feel a lot of people in your practice who are not in alignment with their true self? Like one of your specialties is their true power. I mean, the authentic success, as I see it, is when you are aligned, when you are true to yourself, the more you are yourself, the more whatever success means for you is natural.
But that's again looking at the outer. When you are in alignment, I've written a whole book about that too. It's called "Find and Follow Your Inner Compass."
Yes.
It's again the subjective experience of being in alignment is that you feel the high frequency vibrations, which is love, which is respect, which is gratitude, which is so it's not so much what the outer activity is. When you're in alignment with you have this good energy, and the higher frequencies are love and respect.
True. I agree. And gratitude, isn't that a big one?
Yeah, definitely. Gratitude is the fastest route to lifting your frequency and raising your
I love that. I have a gratitude journal and I do it every single day. I don't want to miss it because it makes such a difference, hey, Barbara?
Yes. Yes.
So is there any strategy that you could give those people, listening now? Somebody's listening out there now and thinking, well, maybe I need a bit of advice of Barbara to, a strategy that I can start.
People are welcome to go on my website and contact me. Now with technology and Zoom, I do sessions with people all over the world.
That's what we do.
Actually,
but is there a step?
I beg your pardon?
Is there a step, an advice, a first strategy that you would, like I'm saying gratitude journal, for example, start a gratitude journal. Is there a step?
Gratitude journal is one of the fastest ways to feel better no matter what the problem is. Okay. If you think about how much we are blessed with. Yeah. And when I say gratitude list every day, it's all the basic stuff, that remind yourself, I wake up in the morning and I can see and I can hear and I can walk and I can talk. And I'm not living in Ukraine. And send a little bit of love to the people who are living in Ukraine. And that was actually what I would like to just say to you that I thought was so interesting. I have been meditating and praying, sending love and support to the people of Ukraine and asking myself often, what can I do to support them? And I just was contacted by a big publisher in Ukraine who wants to publish this book because he thinks healthy models, it's based on democracy, and that's what the people of Ukraine are fighting for. And therefore he believes that my book would be a wonderful support for the people of Ukraine in their struggle for freedom. So I have been so moved by that. I have said to him, he can have my book for free and publish it for me because I really would like to do something to support. Of course. They're all fighting for our freedoms. So this is one of the great moments in our time. How do we deal with that too?
Yes. Very, very true. And how do we deal with that kind of trauma and that because that is huge, eh? I mean, all these children from that generation. All these kids.
If you want this book too, there is some chapters on trauma here, healing in the book.
So, is there anything you want to add? Because time goes very quickly. Is there anything, I would like to ask you like a quote, a statement, something that you live by, Barbara, that could help the person out there listening?
Well, every day I ask myself, what is the highest good that I can facilitate? What is the highest and best version of myself? How can I help? No matter who we are, or where we are, we can always be a force for good.
Wow.
There are no exceptions to that rule.
Wow. And so one of the things you've done now is giving this interview. And I am sure that anyone out there, I mean, people are listening from all over the world. So I'm sure that somebody is really touched by what we have been discussing. So I just want to say thank you so much. Any last word or anything you want to add?
Well, actually, I have so many, we've touched on so many things that if you want, we can talk again, because each one of the small areas we discussed, we could really go into depth. But okay, there's one thing I would say. If you go on my website, I'm offering a free ebook called The Mental Laws, Understanding the Way the Mind Works. And it's a very short ebook, and it's a good introduction to understanding the power of the mind. What we've been talking about.
We've been talking a lot on the show about the power of the mind, because let's be honest, the last 10, 12, 15 years, there's been such discoveries on how we function and how the brain goes and the neuroscience. And it's such an interesting topic, isn't it?
Yes.
So thank you so much as you are such a wise woman who can talk about any subject, if you ask me. So, I will come back to the audience just now. Thank you so much, Barbara. It was a pleasure.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Yes, we are back, and I promised you a conversation about healthy relationship, and I do believe that this conversation really is inspiring us to do better, to be a better version of ourselves, and to actually also realize that we all have a birthright to be here, to be who we are, the right to have that, to express that voice. And I really think that was an important message of Barbara Berger, that a healthy relationship starts with permitting ourselves to be ourselves and to have that voice and to really talk about our own feelings and needs. And as I said in the intro, I think she addressed a little bit about our value of respecting each other's boundaries, how you and we can learn to say no to others and yes to ourselves in a really connective matter. And I loved it when she compared the relationship and the boundaries with how we play tennis on a tennis court, because it is often indeed like that some people cross that boundary of giving us advice and telling us what to do without us asking for it. And I loved it how she explained that when you play tennis, you don't jump over the net into the other half of the court to, where the competitors is. So isn't that a beautiful comparison? And to me, the talk about what human suffering is, that also is a wake-up call for me, because it has all to do with our ignorance, with our interpretation of events, with our own experiences based on our limited belief system. That is why we suffer. And that is what I do with my, hypnotherapy, with a lot of my techniques and strategies that I use, is to go into the subconscious mind and go and find out what those limiting belief systems and limiting beliefs and truths are about ourselves and our lives. So I found that quite, it did something to me, that the suffering is indeed always caused by our interpretation, our perception. And we talked about parenting and how I loved how she sees parenting, the art of letting go, and how the ground rule, of course, is respect. As I said, in my household, my husband and I always talked about two rules. We were sick and tired of always playing that police, and that, you had to tell your children, don't do this and don't do that. And we just decided to have these two rules about respect for yourself and respect for the other. And I'm so honored and happy that Barbara confirmed that, because she says that it is so important to tell your children that you trust their intelligence. I really love that you tell them to try things out and not be scared or fearful of making mistakes. I really, really like that. And in a relationship, the number one ground rule that she was mentioning, and I really love that, is that it's all about respect, especially when we disagree, because loving someone and disagreeing with someone or agreeing with someone is something totally different. You don't have to love and agree with someone. You can disagree and still love yourself or that person or whoever it is as much. So I really liked it, talking about the energy of love, the high vibration of love, and how that high vibration to her is that authentic success that is for her actually a high vibration. Whether we talk about gratitude, whether we talk about love, it's all about the highest vibration possible, so that there's expansion, that there's a lot of a beautiful manifestation going on when we are in that high vibration. It's all about energy, isn't it? And so the first step that she says to get into that, out of that stress and into authentic success, I really loved that she said it's all about our inner state. And repeatedly, indeed, the stress is all about how we see our suffering, how we interpret our events in our life, our stressful events in our life. It's all very subjective. Stress is subjective. So I trust that you had a few strategies here, a few tips here, and that you enjoyed this conversation. And whether you want to connect with Barbara, whether you want to connect with me on being really into alignment with that true self of you, with connecting the head with the heart and being in alignment of who you truly are. If that speaks to you, do not hesitate to contact us. Do not hesitate to go out there and ask for support, ask for guidance. You're not alone in this. I repeat, you are not alone in this. Today, in this year 2023, we are there for each other. There's a lot of information, inspiration, motivation, and guidance out there to help you to shift out of your situation. So I trust that this show has helped you a little bit further down the line, and I will talk to you next week, of course. Bye-bye for now.
From Stress to Authentic Success was presented by Danielle Sachs. Join Danielle at the same time next week here on UK Health Radio. And meanwhile, for more on how to thrive in business and everyday life by being true to yourself, go to daniellesachs.com.